Today, we're digging into the incredible story of how a common, everyday fruit fly helped scientists completely rewrite the rules of aging, proving that our lifespan might not be the fixed clock we always thought it was. I mean, it's one of the biggest questions there is, right? Why do we age? Is it just inevitable, like a machine slowly breaking down? Or is there something else going on entirely?
Well, you're not going to believe it, but the key to unlocking that massive question came from this little guy, Drosophila melanogaster, the humble fruit fly. Seriously, for decades, it's been at the center of research that has turned our understanding of aging upside down.
So here's the journey we're about to go on. We'll start with the evolutionary puzzle of aging itself. Then we'll meet the very special family of flies that made all this possible. We'll watch two big scientific theories go head-to-head, and then see the amazing experiment that actually evolved longer life right there in the lab. That experiment kicked off decades of discovery, all leading to the fly's final, profound lesson for all of us.
Okay, so let's rewind to the 1970s. Our story really starts with a scientist named Brian Charlesworth. Now, he wasn't a doctor looking at diseases of old age. He was a population geneticist. He looked at aging not as a medical problem, but as an evolutionary puzzle that needed to be solved.
But to test his ideas, he needed the perfect subjects. And you couldn't just use any old flies from a lab, no way. He needed a population that was basically wild, just buzzing with all the natural genetic differences that evolution works with.
And this is where our superstar flies enter the scene. Charlesworth got his hands on a population originally collected from some apple orchards by a guy named Philip Ives. And from those flies, he carefully built a special lineage that would become the absolute foundation of aging research for the next 50 years.
So, what was the big deal with these ivy flies? Well, they were kept in massive numbers, which meant they didn't get inbred and genetically boring like a lot of lab animals. This kept a huge amount of natural genetic variation in the mix. That's the raw fuel for evolution. It was like he'd created a perfect little world where he could watch evolution happen in hyperspeed. All right, so we've got the perfect subjects. Now it's time to test the big ideas. In the field of evolutionary biology, there were really two competing theories for why we age, and they were about to have a showdown.
On one side, you've got mutation accumulation. The idea here is pretty simple. If a bad gene only causes problems after you've already had kids, natural selection can't really see it to get rid of it. So, these late-acting bad genes just build up in the population over time. On the other side, there's antagonistic pleiotropy. Sounds complicated, right? But it's really just a trade-off. It says that some genes are good for you when you're young. Maybe they make you super fertile, but they have a nasty side effect that causes problems when you're older. And since being fertile is so important, evolution favors that gene, even with the downside. Now here's the twist. Charlesworth himself, he was betting on the first theory, mutation accumulation. He had a whole prediction about what he'd find in the fly's genetics as they got older. But, as it turns out, the data had a major surprise in store. I mean, the results were just a total shock. There was absolutely zero evidence for his preferred theory. Instead, the data screamed trade-off, just like the second theory predicted. It was crystal clear. The flies that had more babies early in their lives had shorter lifespans. It was a huge, huge win for antagonistic pleiotropy.
This stunning result lit a fire under a young scientist in the lab, Michael Rose. And it made him ask a really radical question. If aging is just a trade-off, can we change the terms? Could we actually force evolution to create longer life right here in our lab? The experiment he designed was just beautiful in its simplicity. Okay, so picture this. He took the ivy flies and made 10 separate populations. 5 of them, the B lines, were the controls. They just bred normally. But the other 5, the O lines, that's where the magic happened. For these flies, he would only collect eggs from the absolute oldest females who were still alive, generation after generation. He was basically sending a direct message to natural selection, saying, hey, I don't care about having babies early, I only care about surviving to old age. So, the big question, did it work? Oh yeah, it worked spectacularly. The O populations, the ones selected for a long life, evolved to live way longer than their cousins in the control group. This was insane. They weren't just watching evolution happen anymore, they were directing it. This was the first real proof that aging isn't some fixed, unchangeable schedule. It's flexible. You can imagine, right? This experiment just blew the doors wide open. It was a total game changer.
For the first time, scientists had these two perfect groups of flies to compare, a normal-lived one and a long-lived one. And they could finally start asking, okay, what exactly is different between them?
And the very first thing they confirmed was that trade-off we talked about. The long-lived O-flies absolutely paid a price for their extra time. They had fewer offspring when they were young. It was the perfect real-world proof of the antagonistic pleiotropy theory. But then, things got even more interesting. It wasn't just about lifespan. These long-lived flies didn't just live longer. They got tougher, a lot tougher. They became more resistant to starvation, to drying out, even to alcohol poisoning. It was this huge revelation that the biology of living longer is deeply, deeply connected to the biology of handling stress.
And when technology finally caught up and they could actually sequence the fly's DNA, what they found was just mind-boggling. There was no single longevity gene, not at all. A longer life was the result of tiny, subtle changes at more than 800 different places in their genetic code. It proved aging is this incredibly complex thing run by a whole orchestra of genes all working together.
Now, this is a really fascinating part of the story, the human side of science. This whole evolutionary way of looking at aging was so new and so different that it actually ran into some serious resistance from the establishment. The research with these flies kept showing that some of the most popular cellular theories of aging just didn't work, but many powerful labs were not exactly eager to publish results that contradicted their favorite ideas. So let's step back. After all these decades of experiments, hundreds and hundreds of generations of flies, what's the big lesson here? What did these tiny little insects ultimately teach us about one of life's biggest mysteries? It all comes down to this, the evolutionary theory of aging. And it says that aging isn't some kind of pre-written self-destruct program, it's a side effect. Think of it like this. Natural selection is like a super protective bodyguard that watches over you fiercely while you're young and having kids. But once you're past that stage, the bodyguard kind of gets distracted. It stops paying attention. Aging is basically everything that goes wrong when the bodyguard isn't looking anymore. And this is the most crucial, most powerful idea in this whole story. Because aging is just an evolutionary side effect. It's not set in stone. The flies proved it. They showed us, without a doubt, that aging is a flexible, malleable trait. It can be changed, and it can be changed fast, if you just give evolution a different set of priorities.
Which, of course, leaves us with one last, massive, tantalizing question. These flies proved that the schedule for aging isn't fixed, it's flexible. So if that's true for a fly, what does it mean for us? If aging can truly be reshaped by evolution, what are the real limits?